Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another day of movement meditations. Today, we're going to be doing a really nice lesson focused on how we sit. Now, I had some initial thoughts about this subject, and one of the things that I was thinking about is when I was looking through the imagery. I always pick an image for the lesson that I'm going to teach. And when I was looking through the imagery for sitting specifically, there was so much variety. There was so much difference in the way that people were sitting. Then I was kind of, questioning myself, like, is there in fact an ideal? So the lesson is titled Ideal Sitting. And maybe as we work through the lesson, you will notice for yourself that there's some degree of organization that happens that maybe brings you into a more ideal position for you. However, at the same time, I think it's also important to think that every situation is different. So one of the images I had was a young kid, sort of, sitting on the sofa, watching his tablet, and he was essentially lying on, or some pretty much lying on his back. It was still a sitting position, but he was almost on his back. And I think that to understand that there is variety and it's okay to sit in different positions is a very important part of this subject. So maybe that will become clearer as we work through the lesson. So first of all, good morning. Hope you had a nice weekend. As you can hear, I'm still suffering from hay fever a little bit this morning, so please bear with me. Hopefully the pollen will go away at some point and I will start to feel a bit more like myself. So I look forward to that, and I'm sure you guys do too. What I'd like to do today is just to orientate yourself to how you're sitting now. So as you sit there, if you just close your eyes and don't try and change anything initially. So you've kind of, you've arrived to the lesson sitting in a specific way. Don't correct it right now. Don't put yourself in a more I don't know, acceptable position in some way. What someone else might tell you is a good position to sit in, or good posture. So I'm going to avoid the word posture in this as much as possible. Morning, Simone. So as you sit there and as you close your eyes, just feel for yourself how how you feel as you sit. Does it feel comfortable? Is there any sense of kind of tension or strain, or some part of your body pulling, some part of you that maybe doesn't feel supported or that's working too hard? Just feel for yourself. What's the degree of comfort? Maybe if you were going to give that comfort a score out of 100, where would you say your current comfort is? And if I gave you the option, if I gave you the opportunity to make yourself more comfortable, what would you do? What would you change? Good. Okay. So what I want to do initially is just very gently, just make sure that your feet are both resting on the floor. Whether you've got shoes on or you're inside and you've got your socks or bare feet. My current favorite is flip-flops around the house. So just feel how your feet are resting on the surface that they're on. And then, just maybe you can feel for yourself, how comfortable does that feel? Do the feet feel like they're in the best place? And if I gave you an opportunity to move them, put them in a more comfortable place, where would you move them to, or would you move them? So one of the things that I think for myself that I've kind of looked at in my habits with sitting is a tendency to lift up feet away from the floor. And through the practice of Feldenkrais and various other meditation practices that all encourage you to have your feet on the floor, well, part of it was a degree of guilt from those things. But actually, over time, what I found is that it became obvious to me that it was important that my feet were on the floor. It wasn't someone else telling me, it was something that I felt in my own body. Okay, so what I'd like to do is we're just going to practice lifting the feet away from the floor. So what I'd like you to do is very gently lift both of the front of your feet up away from the floor. So if your feet are lying on the floor, you're just going to lift the front of the feet so the heel stays on the floor, and then just put them down. And just do it a number of times. You can lift both feet at the same time. That movement between on the floor, they feel when they're in contact with the floor, and then lifting away so that just the heel's in contact with the floor. And just do it a few times, very slowly. A good measure of whether you're doing it slowly is that if it's kind of about 5 seconds, 5 seconds or longer to lift up the foot, and then 5 seconds or longer to put the foot down. Just do that a couple of times. And then just let your feet rest again. Feel your feet on the floor. After making that small movement, how do they feel? Are they listening to the floor more now than they were a second ago? Okay, now the complicated bit. I'd like you to begin to lift your heels away from the floor. Both heels at the same time. Again, if you can take your time, if you can do it in such a way that's actually, roughly around 5 seconds, making this movement. Maybe you can notice your breathing as you do that. And does this change your sense of comfort? So in the whole of you, as you're sitting, as you lift your heels, does it change something further up the body? So earlier I asked, in your current sitting position, do you feel any strain? Do you feel any pull? Do you feel any discomfort or tension? And as you lift your heels, can you notice if there's any sense of increase or decrease in those things? Can you feel as you lift your heels that there's some movement in the knees? So for the people just joining, we're just very gently, slowly lifting the heels away from the floor in the sitting position. Both of the front of the feet stay connected to the floor. And maybe you notice in your knees some movement, maybe even notice in your pelvis there's some movement. There's some kind of movement related to this lifting of the heels. Can you feel what's happening in your pelvis? Good. Okay, take a little rest. Just rest your attention for a second. And now just feel for yourself, kind of as you let go of that movement, you feel your feet on the floor. Maybe if you want, you can open your eyes, but just check in, like how comfortably are you sitting? Good. And then let's go back to that movement, lifting the heels. But what I want you to do is feel that as you lift your heels, there can be a slight rolling back of the pelvis. Just a slight rolling back of the pelvis. And just try it a few times and see if you can get the pace of both heels at the same time. That will encourage the movement up into the hip joint, the socket that joins the hip. with the pelvis, to kind of operate at the same time. So the movement is relatively symmetrical through the body. Good. And maybe as you note it, as you rock your pelvis slightly backwards, as you lift your heel, you notice there's some change in the position of your head. Good. All right. So let that go. And now, what I'd like you to do is just move your head a few times. Move your head to look down gently, and slowly move your head to look up. And take your time. Again, it can be longer than 5 seconds to do this movement, to look down slightly. And to look up slightly. And if you think, we're talking about sitting, but if, for example, and this is quite well known, if your computer screen is down beneath your eye line, then you're going to be looking downwards, and that involves the rest of your body in a specific way. If you're looking up at something, again, your head's going to be tilting upwards. It's going to involve the rest of the body in a certain way. So if we think about the direction that our eyes are pointing, that obviously has some effect on how we sit. So as you go through this movement and you take your eyes down towards the floor and then up towards the ceiling, and as you continue to do this, notice as you take your head down towards the floor, slowly, and up towards the ceiling, does it have some effect on the pelvis? Is there a slight rolling backwards happening in the pelvis at the same time? Don't rush it. Think about that symmetrical quality that we got from the feet, the ankles into the hip joint. So that as you're moving your head down through the midline, looking downwards, and then up through the midline to look upwards. And you feel for yourself which of those is more comfortable or maybe more familiar. So is it more familiar to be in this extended position, or is it more familiar to be in this flexed position? So you might notice that as if one of those is more comfortable, as you go towards the other one, it becomes less comfortable. You might notice some increase in strain or tension, and just don't go into that. Don't push into that discomfort, and just move away from it and come back to comfort. You can explore the edge of it and then just come back. Just feel what feels right for you. So in my thought process of this lesson, calling it ideal sitting, there was a bit of me that wanted to say right at the beginning of the lesson, all of you, whoever's watching, even before we started, were sitting in an ideal position, because it's the position that you chose. And that's the important thing. It's not that there is some external ideal, something that you should be conforming to. It's that you feel an idealness in yourself. I'm not sure what you mean by that, the midline. So if you just think that as you're looking down, the point in between both eyes, and then as you're looking up, follow that point between both eyes. So the midline is like through the middle of the body, down through the nose, the sternum. But if you just think about the point that the eyes triangulate to, good. Okay, and then take a rest from that. And after doing it, just feel where you bring your head back to. What's the position that you come back to? Is it looking upwards Is that your habitual position? Is it looking downwards? Like, where does your head come back to as you are sitting comfortably? Good. And then just close your eyes if you haven't already, and just feel the movement of your breath. Feel whether the in-breath and the out-breath have some relevance to how we're sitting. I taught a lesson in my Qigong class yesterday that focused on the movement of the sternum. And I think I might teach it actually in one of these morning sessions, but it really kind of gave awareness to the front of our body as we breathe in and breathe out. So we think about sitting, an ideal sitting in relation to our spine and the organization of our spine. But what about the front of the body? Is there an ideal sitting position for the abdomen or the throat? Good. So now we're going to combine the two things that we did, okay? So you're going to lift your heels up. As you lift your heels up, you're going to take your head down to look towards your heels or look in between your feet. And then as you put your feet back down, you're just going to bring your head back up to the horizon and just do it a couple of times. Taking your heels up away from the floor, taking your eyes downwards towards the floor. So it's like you're meeting your heels and your eyes together in some way in the middle of you. And as you put your heels back on the floor, then you just come up to a normal sitting position, have your eyes roughly out on the horizon again. Just do it a number of times. Notice as you do it that your pelvis is involved. That there's some movement in order to facilitate this of the pelvis. And how does the pelvis move? Where does it go? You can answer in the chat if you fancy it. Yeah, that's normal. The midpoint doesn't necessarily feel like the midline, but that's so. Simone, if you remember my lesson on right and left, that might be a good one to revisit, because it's like the clarification of one side and the other side forms a very natural midline. So as you lift your heels, you bring your head towards the floor, your eyes are looking down, and maybe you notice that your spine rounds, the front of your body contracts slightly, the throat moves downwards, the abdomen tightens or shortens. And then as you come back, when the heels touch the floor, you come back and the sitting position changes. So you feel that these are all sitting positions. You can be in sitting throughout this whole process. And none of these are incorrect. So as you look down, your spine rounds, your pelvis rolls backwards, your feet come off the floor, your heels come off the floor. That's still a sitting position. You're still in sitting. And then as you bring your heels back down to the floor, let your body come back to a kind of more organized position towards the horizon, then that's still sitting as well. Okay, so now what I want you to do is lift the front of the feet a few times. And as you lift the front of the feet, take the head upwards so that you're tilting the feet up as you're taking the head up. And just do it a number of times. Do it slowly, the feet and the head coming up, tilting upwards together, as if the feet are looking in the same direction as the head, or the head is looking at the same direction as the feet. And does that have an effect on your pelvis as well? Does your pelvis make a movement in this position? And could you consider that this is also a sitting position? Maybe you feel that your spine could arch in some way and your pelvis could roll forwards as you do this. Good. Take a little rest. And just feel how you're sitting now. Where do you settle? And in this settled position, or in this version of sitting that we're currently in, how capable do you feel of movement? Do you feel capable of standing up or lying back, turning to the side? So within the Feldenkrais method, the sense of ideal, especially in relation to sitting, but it's also in relation to standing, but it's just the ability to move. Do I restrict my ability to move by putting myself in a specific position? Okay, so begin to lift your feet again. Lift the front of your feet. Lift the front of your feet, and now look down at the front of the feet. Good. As you lift the front of the toes, you look down and notice if your pelvis rolls back in a slightly different way than when you were doing that with the heels. And then as you begin to come forwards, can you lift your head as you lift your heels? Look towards the ceiling as you lift your heels away from the floor. And then put your heels back down. Look down towards the floor as you lift your toes, lift the front of your feet, and see if you can go between these two movements. Slowly moving the spine between bending and flexing, extension and flexion. As you look down, you lift the toes to meet your head. And as you look up, you lift your heels as if they're also looking up into the sky. Could you make that a little faster? Could it become like a rocking movement? You know, those old school rocking chairs that you see on old West style porches. Could you be rocking backwards and forwards on your pelvis, looking up and down at the floor at the same time as lifting and lowering your heels and the front of your feet alternatively? Good. And then just leave yourself in a comfortable position. Very gently, just lift and lower the front of the feet and the back of the heels alternatively. See if you can do it really quickly. I don't know if you can hear that, but there's a sense that I'm doing it quite quickly now. Okay, and then let it go. And then just close your eyes. Close your eyes and feel how your feet are on the floor. Very gently with your eyes closed, just rock your pelvis a tiny bit backwards. Feel how that changes the position of the head. And rock your pelvis a tiny bit forwards and see how that changes the position of the head. Good. And then find somewhere comfortable in the middle of those two experiences. Not rocking forwards, not rocking backwards. And then again, take the eyes up towards the ceiling and down towards the floor. And just feel that those are two options, and that sitting can involve all of them and the whole variety between the two options. Come back to somewhere in the middle. And feel your feet on the floor. Feel how your pelvis is resting on the chair. And feel how your head and your skull, your jaw, your eyes is all resting comfortably on your spine. So the phrase that they use in relation to animals when they're about to do something is like they're poised to act. So that cat is poised to pounce on that whatever. And could you feel in some way that this sitting position that we're now in is poised for movement? You could lift your feet in different ways. You could move your pelvis in different ways. You could move your head in different ways. And all of those are available to you. And how comfortable does it feel? Does it feel comfortable? And would you, again, as I said at the beginning of the lesson, would you change the position you're in to help you feel more comfortable? So this is the version of ideal that I want to move towards. That the ideal is not in some kind of external idea of what posture is and what position is and what sitting is. It's actually in terms of how you feel, what feels right to yourself. So does your sitting right now feel ideal? And I'd love to hear your comments in the chat about that. And play with it throughout the day. We're spending a lot of time sitting at the moment. Maybe you want to change your position. Find a way within the variety of sitting positions that you find yourself in to find comfort within them. And that's really that sense of finding ideal. So thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. There's a bit of me that thinks that I might spend a week working or thinking about sitting. So if that's interesting, let me know. Tonight I am teaching a Feldenkrais lesson at 8 p.m. UK time. It's a full-length lesson. The lessons are based on the Esalen series. I've been running through the series and I'm now on lesson 40 out of, I think, 46. So we're really coming towards the end of that series. So if you're interested in that, give me a shout and I can point you to the details for the class. You can also join my Facebook group. The details are in the description, wherever that is. Within that, I post a link to the Zoom class, so you can access it that way. There's also a link to my PayPal account. If you want to make a donation for these lessons, I very much appreciate that. So, okay, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Happy Monday, and I will see you tomorrow at 11. Take care. Bye.